So yeah, this is probably, in the States, probably the most well-known Brazilian film, given its what happened with it at the getting 4 Oscar nominations. Although I ended up doing some research about it because I was like, I knew it got Oscar nominations, and I looked up what they were, and they're all for major categories and not foreign language film. And so because it was like director, screenplay, cinematography, and editing. And so I looked into this, and it's because they ended up being nominated for the 2004 Academy Awards, even though the movie came out in 2002. So the time it would have been eligible for foreign language would have been 2003 in those awards. But there's always been weird stuff around that category, and they've made changes recently that I don't know the details of. But it can have limitations where essentially the country itself has to choose its representative that it submits like for the award, and you can't have like more than one from each country. I don't know if they've changed that detail recently, but I know they've at least changed it from foreign language to like international feature or whatever in some case, so that it doesn't necessarily have to be it can be in English. But anyway, apparently it was a big enough film, and it ended up being popular enough that they released it in theaters in the States, and they kept it running into 2003 so that it could be eligible for the 2004. And it was mainly the production company who kind of put forward this push for the nominations. I won't mention the name specifically because it's that guy who may or may not have a movie about him out right now this weekend called She Said. So it was him that did the push for that and kind of got these nominations, but they are well deserved. It's interesting. So it was made in the early 2000s, and so it really has that kind of style of filmmaking that you would see in like action thrillers around that time. Like if you ever watched a Tony Scott movie during that period, something like Man on Fire, where it's a lot of like quick cuts through both like within the scenes themselves and through kind of like various streets and the city, like kind of when it's establishing its setting, and like the camera's like moving very quickly and like blurs a lot, kind of have these like weird flashing colors and stuff of like greens and yellows and stuff like that. So it's very interesting, like kind of going back to that really frenetic style. It has kind of some like the handheld, a lot of handheld stuff, and a jittery camera like you would see, in kind of those Bourne movies were famous for, of just like nauseating people with those crazy action sequences. So it's certainly interesting, like kind of seeing that style again, that really like frenetic pace. But if you really focus on it, you can see why this movie was nominated for cinematography and editing. It's very good, and every once in a while it'll slow down a little bit and really have just there's such a variety of interesting like shot styles and techniques that he just like switches through constantly throughout the film. One that really stuck out to me is kind of like Shaggy's death, where he's kind of going up to a car and like trying to escape out of the city, and then gets hit, and then it's just a shot in the camera from the car, like driving along, and it's just him like running through buildings and like taking more hits until he eventually dies. It was a really impressive scene, and just like a single camera take of this guy just like sprinting through kind of in between alleyways and stuff. I was really struck by. Anyway, I kind of just jumped off here, but this a movie kind of it's a crime thriller. It's kind of one of your classic kind of in the thick of it all type movies where you see, characters and actors kind of age up, kind of in this city where it's very, very hard for any upward mobility. And so you're kind of, stuck between very limited options of what you're going to try and do to survive and make a living in the world. And so, yeah, so it's kind of, we see kind of a few characters grow up through it and, get representations from either side of the tracks, as they might say. So it kind of has stuff that, we've seen in other things, your Slumdog Millionaire type thing, or your Boys in the Hood, where kind of you get that, just kind of get this like inner city lifestyle and try and how they're making their way through life, and then obviously the drug trade and the gangs and get involved in all that, and we kind of just see these characters going through it, and yeah, just some really interesting, just not any actors you would ever heard of, with the extreme exception of Alice Braga, who has transferred over into pretty well known in the States at this point and doing various things. Fernando Meirelles, the director, also had kind of this was his big hit, and went on to do the Constant Gardener and Blindness, and has done some stuff for HBO as well. Just a really skilled director, and kind of does that Wire thing where it's a lot of just like local actors and no one trained or whatever. They just kind of just bring in citizens and extras and all that stuff and just have them in here. And yeah, just like kind of the pacing and the action and the surprisingly like heavy violence at times. It's just all like in your face and frenetic and heart pounding and I like the lead character and his narration. It's a movie where the narration like style actually like works, and he kind of like weaves in and out where it stops and starts. It's not always following one. It'll follow a certain set of characters through a point and then jump back a little bit to see what another character was doing, and then bring his story forward. It's not a style and a pacing that works all the time, but just seems everything just kind of clicks in this movie, and I was really impressed by that, and how it just goes along, and kind of this, and how the main villain comes out and is kind of the focus like throughout the film up until his eventual demise, a really Omar-esque demise, as what happened in The Wire. And so yeah, I was just enthralled throughout. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, the reputation of this movie certainly precedes it, and I was really excited to watch it, and it did not disappoint. I feel deflated because I was going to talk a whole lot about The Wire, and you sort of beat me to it, Matt. Yeah, I was reading as well that like there were not enough like trained black actors in Brazil when this was made. So like everyone went through like a 2-month crash course, theater workshop, and like they were all just local people, and it's like, yeah, you're in now. Yeah, it maybe feels like The Wire in so much as The Wire is Dickensian, like all these like tiny micro stories that make up this like larger cultural ecology. That's definitely how this movie feels.
And it's cyclical too. Like that's always a big thing with the drug trade, or the war never changes. All that style of stuff where one person rises and then falls, and then someone else rises in its place, and it's just the same over and over.
Yeah, the very end was Wire series finale. Like the game remains the same, but Michael becomes the new Omar, and the rents will be the drug lords, a generation from now.
Yeah, I think the cinematography reminded me a little bit of The Wire as well, in the sense that it's often like you're getting a glimpse into like a hidden world. There's a lot of shots, especially with Rocket, because he's trying to take photographs from afar. He's sort of peering through objects, peering through windows and gratings, and sort of seeing what life is like. at the margins, and just that feeling of like entrapment. The idea that all of these this underclass of people are kind of trapped by their environment and trapped by social and economic conditions to the point where it's almost impossible to avoid being sucked into crime. Because you're taught, like, if you want to get ahead, crime is the only way to do it. And, there's several scenes in The Wire of characters trying to get a proper job and either being humiliated or losing the job or just, being sucked back into that world because it's just, that's all they have. Just this sort of marginalized group of people who have been like locked away by society and they're not seen and not thought about by everyone else, but it's like sort of getting a little glimpse into that world, what it's become.
It feels so like isolated too. Like the police have barely any presence, and it's like beyond the newsreels. It seems like no one cares. It feels like it's a war zone in another country, and not just like a different neighborhood in the same city.
Yeah, absolutely. The cinematography is really amazing. That's the first thing that grabbed me when I started watching it. And I'd seen it a couple of, maybe like more than 10 years ago, but it was a pleasure to watch it again because it just grabs your attention so quickly. And I think it lacks the sort of the patience and the deliberateness of The Wire, but it's more just sort of like frenzied. The way the camera moves through everything, the colors are so vibrant, almost garish. It's almost like grotesque at points, how sort of colorful and like bright it is. You get a sense of the heat and the bright sun splashing off reflective surfaces and sort of drawing beads of sweat from people's skins, and they're always kind of like shielding their eyes. And just that sense, like it's perfect in the opening scene where you're just looking at a chicken, looking around, terrified, like getting snatches of images of its environment and realizing it's in danger. And I feel like lots of characters experience that throughout the film, where they're just kind of, there's so much going on that they don't even know what to focus on. And it creates this paranoia, like you don't know where the gunshot's going to come from, or the knife's going to come from, or the danger is going to emerge. And also, like, I love the non-linearity, both like spatially and narratively, like the fact that you're sort of jumping from person to person, and it's like, now I'm going to tell you this guy's story, or like, it's not time to tell you this guy's story. And it creates this sense of like a lived-in world, but you're not moving, you're sort of jumping back and forth in time. But also, you're often, the buildings that make up the city aren't really discrete, demarcated spaces. They're often like flowing through the city streets, jumping in and out of windows, where the city is almost like doesn't matter. Like they tried to impose some kind of order upon this space, and it doesn't matter. Everyone just kind of moves to the beat of their own drum and moves along their own invisible sort of pathways and whatnot.
You talked about the narration earlier, Duncan, about Rocket, and I think it's interesting to me because for Elite Squad, when we get there, I find the narration a lot of the time really oppressive and grating.
I agree. Oh, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
But Rocket, he is this sort of passive, Ario Hotel, like camera POV, like this photographer just passively observing things, but in an insightful way.
And he's such a normal, like, likable, geeky kid. Like it's just bad luck that he's been chucked in this highly dangerous place. But he's just trying to like make a living and get a girlfriend and have fun with his friends and listen to music. And it just his life keeps getting interrupted by this horrific gang violence. And again, he tries to do things the right way, but it's like this system is just not set up for that. He's immediately discriminated against and thought of as a hood, and then he starts thinking, all right, well, I just want to like get some money and impress this girl, so I have to commit a crime. So you can see how easily it is for just any everyday person. And knock out Ned, this like straight working class guy, is just his life is just ruined by this horrific criminal element, and just completely changes him as a person. And so many characters are like, this happened to me and I want revenge. This happened to me and it's traumatized me and I want revenge. The only way I can respond to this injustice is through violence, and to make other people suffer the way I did, or make other people suffer in order to climb out of the hell that I've been chucked into. But I think, yeah, it is really good to have Rocket because he is likable, and there's so many really repulsive characters in this. So it allows you to sort of attach onto someone and root for them and feel protective of them. And I was really happy that he survived and had a relatively happy ending by the end of the film.
Right, yeah. Even though it's just like a minimal paid internship that he gets from like all his hard work,
Yeah.
like still just barely gets his foot in the door.
Yeah. Going into basically a war zone to photograph the most dangerous people in the country.
Yeah, and then like no one else has the ability to. But yeah, no, you mentioned the sequence where he tries to go commit a crime to get money and just like keeps running into people that like he ends up like liking and making friends with. Yeah, I couldn't do it, man. Yeah, like that was Knockout Ned. He's cool, man. Oh, I
He was
really
too
like
cool,
that girl.
man.
Yeah, I got her number. Oh, this Sao Paulo guy. Fuck this guy. It's like, oh no, man. He's just like hippie who we can like smoke with. No, like let's leave him alone. It was great.
Which is really hopeful. Which shows like once you actually connect with someone, it's hard to kill them. So like all these gangsters just shoot first and ask questions later. But if they for a character who just stops a little bit, even though he's compelled to commit the crime for whatever sociological pressure he's under, he realizes, no, once I establish a shared humanity with someone, it's actually hard to kill them. What did you guys think of Little Z?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a lot of child soldier, child violence in this. That's pretty wild. And yeah, definitely not for the faint of heart. And yeah, certainly the maniacal laughing of the young actor kid who does that scene with the motel is pretty wild. But yeah, he's certainly has a presence about him, and it's a type of character we've seen before in various places. If we want to keep bringing up the wire, like Marlowe, very similar characteristics there. And yeah, I thought he makes for a good driving force. Even though you can kind of just he's somewhat predictable in how he's basically gonna respond violently to most things. But yeah, I thought it was certainly a very magnetic performance and a good driving force of the movie.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that almost none of these were professional actors, because I thought the facial acting on Rocket and Little Z was really amazing at points. And he, even as despicable and psychopathic as he is, like that moment where he like tries to talk to that lady and can't do it, is like you almost feel sympathetic, and then he immediately does something horrific again. But it's sort of like even this guy, he just doesn't know how to be human, or he just doesn't know how to accept rejection. All he knows is violence, and that's what he does, and that's how he responds to situations. And it reminded me of the villain in like Schindler's List, in the sense that there's like several moments where he almost starts to like be human, and he just can't do it, and he just immediately senses weakness within him and immediately responds with violence, like shows a little bit of mercy and then like doubles down on sadism. So it's just it's a really
Amon Geth comp is incredible.
Yeah,
it's like this close to like some genuine connection with this lady, and it's like, this isn't how I'm supposed to be. We need to quash this in me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously we get the kind of a classic what's the word? Not foil, but anyway, a guy in Benny who I thought was a great character. Really enjoyed kind of the older actor and him. Yeah, his like transition from kind of like a hood to what's the term they used in the film for just kind of more of a laid back hippie style,
groovy sort of.
Yeah, there was something else I'm forgetting. But anyway, he's kind of like the... Wait, say that again?
Playboy?
Yeah, there you go. That was definitely definitely one of them. Where yeah, he's kind of the classic right hand man, to Z, that kind of basically the one that keeps him in check, as he's more of a chill, laid back guy. And then yeah, once he gets killed, well, and then it's over. Then it's wartime for the next year and a half.
It gives it such a tragic, epic quality that, like, the one, once he is killed, it's like all bets are off, and the favelas just descend into violence and horror.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because of just because of a stray bullet that didn't find its mark, and just because a particular song was playing or a particular lights were flashing a certain way. It's like that moment changed the fate of this entire area.
Mm-hmm.
And it could have easily gone the other way, and maybe the City of God could have gone in a more humane, trajectory if Benny had been in charge rather than Lil Z.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of the sort of movement through time, like the fact that it starts in the 1960s, just as the City of God is being built, and it's mostly just open spaces and dusty plains and forests, and then it becomes more just this urban jungle. And then slowly just disintegrates with bullet holes and flame and decay.
I mean, yeah, like I always like that kind of going through time and seeing something build up, even at the cost of time jumps and a frantic pace. We can make some, as the arguments that went around over House of the Dragon, and all the years it's covered and various jumping through time. It's certainly a hard thing to do, especially in a movie format where you only have 2 hours to do all this. But I've always, the reason I read epic fantasy in the first place is I always like to see, I always want to see more of the story. So I always like to have kind of the background and everything, and see kind of, as many paths as possible that kind of have led to, whatever climactic moment it is, or whatever kind of the major turning points are in the story. So I always like having that history, especially in a film that's very much about a particular city, and kind of its development over time. I think it's important.
Yeah, it's great world building. You see the place being built over time, the political influences that caused it, the role that drugs played in changing the society, all the different characters that make it up. Like, you meet so many different people, and Rocket is trying to explain who they are and why they're important. And at several points he even says, "Oh, this guy's important, but I'll get back to him," and he never gets back to him. So it just has this really cool conversational style, like he's just kind of escorting you through the City of God and telling you all of the stories, all of the little narratives that make up the fabric of it. I also love the idea of like a hidden history, or a history that hasn't been told. Like the history of Brazil would be told from a very top-down colonial point of view, but this is the history of the City of God. This is the history of a small place. But even this small place that no one thinks is important and is filled with people who society doesn't care about, has this powerful, tragic, sometimes comedic, epic story, epic battle of wills and personalities and hopes and dreams sort of churning around inside it. And I thought it was funny how, like, even in the City of God, there's like a nostalgia, this sort of romantic nostalgia for what drug dealing used to be with the Tender Trio, like these sort of Robin Hood figures. They used to be the criminals, but then gradually worse and worse criminals took over, and worse drugs started circulating, from weed and then to coke and then to worse things. And guns started to be involved, and it just kind of, obviously rose-colored glasses, but the idea that even the criminal underbelly was corrupted. Yeah, it's so packed with ideas, and a lot of the ideas are only given a few sentences. But I liked how, when the City of God was being formed, Rocket says something about, the fat cats in politics don't really care about us. They only care about these people. They just want to get us out of the way. The fact that it shows why a lot of these drug lords are tolerated, because they actually keep the peace. that it's better to have one big, powerful drug lord. And you even see little Z, as horrible as he is, he's going around saying, like, we don't want violence here, we don't want killings here, we don't want these runts going around wildly attacking and robbing people because that is bad for the community, or it's bad for the police coming in and scrutinizing what we're doing. And it shows you the police corruption that all of this depends upon, and the fact that the police are exploiting this suffering and this violence, and that even little Z, as powerful as he seems to be throughout the whole movie, is really just a little fish in a big pond that the police and the politicians are looming over and can just strip him of his power whenever they feel like it. So it weaves like a complex sort of socio-political tapestry, I thought, in a really entertaining and sort of blithe way.